I'm here to talk about empathy. So let's start with a little exercise. We live in a big world, and there's a lot of things happening in the world at any given time. A young boy taking his first steps, someone else finishing their first book, new job, new house, love. There's lots of reasons for happiness and joy. But not all of us are like that. Not all of us are going through the best of times. And some of us have been there for a while. Some of us are facing minor inconveniences and others going through life-altering trauma. So how do we feel when we see them? How do they feel? What worries them? What scares them? And if we think about this, what would they want? So let's take this girl for example. What would we think she'd want? What is she looking for? You see, that thought right there is what we're here to talk about. Because when we see something like this, a very specific set of thoughts go through our head. For someone like this, we're probably thinking what she needs is more autonomy, more agency, more freedom to express herself. But really, these are all just assumptions, right? What she might be looking forward to is finishing the next book on her checklist, or traveling to a different place, or meeting new people, or just watching a superhero franchise movie and a long list of other superhero franchise movies, like we all do. When we look at someone, we get to feel what they're feeling. And that's because of these motor neurons within us called mirror neurons. It's like telepathy for the brain. So when we see her, we feel something. But then as we feel this, we go back and we go back into empathy, and we use the age-old saying that we've all grown up with, the golden rule: do unto others as you want others to do unto you. And in this case, we put ourselves in her shoes, and we think, what is it that we'd want? But she's not us. And really, it's impossible to know what it is that she'd want. The only person who can truly answer that question, the only person who knows what would significantly change and impact her life, is her. The world is a big place. And I don't just mean in space, but also in time. You see, time diverges. And these divergences then change and solidify. Time is complex. Two people can start in the same place in the world, take opposite paths, and come back and meet in that same spot after 10 years. And they will be in the same spot they were a decade ago, but they themselves will not be the same. And so if people change so much in 10 years, what about civilizations over hundreds of years? Like many coming of age in this modern global world, I met plurality at an early age. My Muslim, Pakistani, Punjabi parents taught me the moral sensibilities of addressing my elders while giving me a love for colorful clothes. 300 miles and a year later, I moved to Peshawar. There I learned the value of tribal pride, about earning your sense of strength as a virtue of masculinity, and then giving up that power in reverence to women by lowering your gaze and putting a thin veil between you and them of amicable, short conduct. A few years later, and 700 miles, I landed in the Hindu kingdom of Nepal, in Kathmandu. And over there, I saw a very different type of power, mundane freedom. And in contrast to burqas, you would find early in mornings older women being able to bathe freely outside without any worry or decorum. What contrast? Two neighboring countries, two neighboring places, yet worlds apart. But you see, that's not the only thing that surprised me. The world is very complex. This world is made up of a lot of different people, a lot of different things. And the same thing happened when I moved again to Canada a few years later. And then when I moved here subsequently to the States. Two pairs of countries, two very close countries, and yet again, very different. One focuses on caring for the collective, and the other about individual excellence. Also, those opposite worlds of Peshawar and Nepal were only 700 miles apart, like Dallas and LA. So that might explain a lot about Dallas and LA. See, one of the luxuries that I had when I moved so much was that I didn't have the ability to be right. I was never right, and I was crystal clear that I didn't know anything. Never was I able to put myself in someone else's shoes, and so never was I able to judge them. Because I knew I was the minority, and I was different. And the golden rule didn't fit me. And that served me really well. Because it allowed me to not carry the burden of judgment. It allowed me to stop focusing on the part of me that would have enforced culture and replace that with curiosity. And instead of looking at other people's behavior, I just only seeked to understand it. And this freedom to not police, to not control, to not judge, allowed me to see a more basic truth, that no matter how different we all are, underneath all of this, underneath all our feelings and emotions, we're all the same, right? That no matter how the social norms or social values change, the moral values are often the same. That no matter how much diversity you see, we all have the same feelings. Because after all, we're all human. And even though this approach to empathy, though different than the golden rule, does not solve all moral dilemmas, it actually allows us a space to have a conversation of differences without judgment. And so we don't rush to hear something, to reply, to talk through, or to trash away. And it allows us to have a deeper communication. And by focusing on this and focusing on what we feel and not focusing on what others should or shouldn't be doing, we can finally get to a place where we leave room for actual solutions. Because when I didn't have the golden rule, I realized that within me, the inside-out approach, the golden rule approach to empathy, was being replaced by an understanding that diversity exists. And by openness to the idea that solutions don't have to have sacrifices. I could thrive in worlds so different between Pakistan, Nepal, Canada, and other places, only because I realized that all I had to do, that if I wanted to share something, I would share what I felt and not share how other people had to be or not be. And that I could live a life the way I wanted and they could live a life that they wanted without ever stepping on each other's toes. Because every problem has a solution that doesn't destroy someone else in the middle. And when we do that and when we understand this, and if we can accept the differences, it is only then that we create a space for us to come together to understand the commonality between us all. So if we only are able to tap into this emotion behind the expression, the emotions behind the issues that we fight about, and move beyond the golden rule, from feeling and prescribing to feeling and sharing, or feeling and asking, then we'd all be able to understand each other. That no matter the issue, we often forget that this small and subtle change of judgment to asking, to understanding that the world is big, to understanding that there is space, can really change our perspective. And this small little thing, this small little modification to the channel of empathy could change our own world. See, understanding empathy is important because empathy isn't some grand concept of benevolence or charity. Empathy isn't something that kicks in on weekends when we go to church, or we go to a food drive, or we go to a soup kitchen. Empathy was created by biology as a lubricant to social organization. Empathy helps us understand how we feel and how we feel about the world, and then how we make decisions about how we feel in that world. It's pernicious in its effect. It's small but ever present. And that's why the golden rule, this age-old concept from 1900 BC that has been passed down all these years to humanity to today, may need to be looked at. It may need to be changed because we're creating policies and interaction based on of this, and they're not working. This inside-out approach to humanity, this me putting myself in someone else's shoes and deciding what I want for them, this causes a lot of confusion and unnecessary confusion. Because in a world of diversity, assuming normalcy is the extreme. So today is the longest in humanity in time. This is the longest we've ever traveled in time, right? Today, there are cultures and subcultures that have grown and developed over hundreds and thousands of years. And yet we continue to exist in this old paradigm of inside-out empathy, and we keep assuming that what is best for us is best for them. And then we work hard with will and power and force and lobbying and protesting. We try to force that on other people. And then we expect it to work. I'm surprised we expect it to even stay. Because this model of empathy has the personality of a dictator, okay? Where the person with power gets to decide what the solution is and apply that to everyone else. And this world no longer has patience for that, or patience for people coming in and switching and changing turns. Plurality is here to stay. And the only way we're going to get through this is if we understand that. Because it's not just time. We also have technology that's coming up. And technology constantly amplifies what we can do, right? It's making us 10 times, 100 times more productive, but it's also making us 10 to 100 times more effective, which means when we do something, it affects a greater audience in a greater way. And when they react, they have the same technology. And they react in the same amplified manner. And so in a world where poverty is lowering and infant mortality is lowering and lifespans are higher and education is higher, why do we feel so divided? Why do we feel so polarized and unequal? Maybe it's not that we've become more cruel, it's just that our capabilities have grown and we have not with them. We've upgraded technology, but maybe not upgraded empathy. So this golden rule, this rule that we've faced and created over time, this is the rule of a deaf authoritarian in my mind. It creates laws that marginalize and policies that break and solutions that just don't work. And instead of using this and creating everything around us by prescribing, maybe we should be asking. And creating laws that withhold moral consistency, we should really be looking for laws that are relevant to the society that they're applying to, or the place that they're applying to. I want to end this in a way that more than just talks about empathy. Because the idea of empathy, I think, shouldn't just be heard, it should be felt. Because we need to know what path we're on, and we need to know how big this gap is. So let's take a variety of different people. Let's take a variety of different people, shapes and sizes. Let's do this experiment, and let's put them in one of the biggest artifacts of the golden rule that we currently have. Let's put them in a melting pot. And when we put them in a melting pot, we expect a brilliant swirling mesh of colors of different shapes and sizes coming together, and expecting that this whole is greater than the sum of its parts. But I did that experiment, and the reality is that this is what we get. But instead, if we took this new approach of empathy, and we allowed people to be their true selves, their whole selves, and we didn't destroy or assimilate or force people to come to their lowest common denominator, maybe the same thing would look a little bit different. And so, will we become the dystopia we fear today, or the utopia we hope for tomorrow? Depends entirely on us. Are we going to continue with this and focus entirely on technology and all the other aspects of our lives, or are we going to look back at ourselves and say, maybe it's time for us to upgrade our empathy? The choice is ours. Thank you.